Need easy thank you cards that still say wow? Today our video inspiration team is sharing 10 beginner-friendly tutorials that you can make for any occasion, from birthdays to weddings to everyday gratitude. Let's dive in. If you have stencils, inks, and blending brushes, create 3 cards with just one stencil art set by Erum. In this video, Erum demonstrates how to craft 3 distinct card designs using just a single stencil art stencil set, making it perfect for beginners. She showcases layered stenciling techniques to build dynamic backgrounds, applies blending and colour gradients for visual depth, and adds simple die cuts or embossed elements to elevate the look.
I'll be using the stencil art white cap peonies today that I'll create a few colorways. You'll find instructions for the other 2 on the blog. I'm going to use the 5th stencil to figure out where my placement is going to be, and this seems appropriate. It fits the entire stencil, and it also shows me that when I cut this out for die cutting, it will cut out the entire image without any complications. So that's how I figure out the placement. For the first color combination, I'm going with pinks and purples. So the colors I'll use are Rubelite, Raspberry, crisp dye inks, and for the purple, I'll use Hydrangea and Ultraviolet. I usually stick to 2 inks, and it normally depends on the pressure of my hand. So if I want to apply lighter inks, I'll just apply a light pressure, and if I want to add a darker ink somewhere, a more concentrated or saturated ink, I'll just add ink with a lot of pressure or just apply the darkest ink. I also choose to use a different blending tool if I want to apply a lighter ink. Like I'll start with the small blending tool and apply ink for the first layer using that. And if I want to apply a more concentrated or saturated ink, I would use the mini blending brush. You do not have to follow the same inking position as the previous stencil. Feel free to try a different blend. Purple over purple isn't necessary. You can add a bit of pink over purple in the second stencil or the third or the fourth. Do your own thing and don't overthink. Have fun while creating these panels. I had so much fun and enjoyed myself immensely. I wasn't thinking anything except for having fun, really. I was playing with color, and you should do the same. Now, if you want a more vibrant flower, you can add more ink. We have more layers, so you can add more ink. Okay, now I'll switch to the mini blending brush because I really want to add darker color now. And I'm extending that pink. Now I'm also going to extend the purple. I'll still use the hydrangea first. Add that purple onto the pink and then extend it. You can keep the tips lighter if you want to. Let's see how it looks. I like the look. And we have one more over here, A4. It's very easy layering. Now here you can switch to darker inks. I think these will work too, but it's best to switch to darker inks. For this one, I will use pink first so that it is a little different instead of adding purple here. And on the pink one, I can add the purple just to see how it looks. The leftover purple that I already have, just to see how it looks. And it looks really nice, actually. I'm also going to add a bit of ultraviolet over here in the right in the center so that it's really dark and adds a bit of dimension. And look at that. Do you see that? It looks really, really good. So we have this now, which is stencil number 5. This is just going to color the extra bits over here and also going to color the rest of the flower. Let's start with a dark purple right off the bat here and then add a bit of pink to this. Leftover ink with the pink. Oh no, oh no. I needed, oh God. Sorry, made a mistake. Instead of the 4th stencil, I used the 5th stencil. Apologies. So this is the number 4 stencil, and we already added the purple. It's all right. It's all right. Everybody makes mistakes. Anyway, what I'm going to do is the same thing. We're going to repeat that. I'm going to add that purple, the dark purple, I'm going to add the pink, leftover ink. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I will add the leftover purple ink that I have. Oh, I don't have any. And I will add whatever purple ink I have here. Add it dark over here because this is going to be the darkest part, as I think it's going to be. Now I'm going to use the leftover pink ink. Then I will go back to the 5, stencil 5. Okay, I'm going to add the dark purple here. Then I'm going to add the dark pink. I'm going to go switch to Ruby Light. I'm going to take a darker purple, which is Andromeda, and just add it to this area. For the green portions, the leafy bits like the stems and the leaves, I am going to use Forest Fern Fresh Dye ink. And there's a reason I am using the second layer of this stencil for the stems and the leaves. It's because once I applied the Forest Fern through the second layer, I'll use the first layer, which is the base layer, and I'll add the pink color that I used on the flowers and add it to the tips of some of the leaves. It's easier to add that to the white portion instead of adding it at the end, because it's just going to create a gray color or just create a muddy color. You can do that. You can also add it at the end, but it's better to add it to a plain white surface so it's more visible, unless that's not what you are going for and you want a subtle grayish tone. Then by all means add the pink. Once you are done adding green, then keep the tips of your leaves lighter, or the areas that you want to add the pink to slightly light, so that you can add pink and it's a little visible. To this last stencil, stencil number 6, I'm going to use Dark Night Crisp Dye ink, and I'm going to add this to the areas where I want to show intense shadow or depth. And then I will use the leftover pink ink on my blending brush to softly blend this out. I'll apply more saturated ink to the green portions, the same Forest Fern, and then I will use a micro blending brush to apply Dark Night to some of the portions of the green bits as well, just to add more depth. Now the Dark Night works in this case because it goes with the purple and it also goes with the green. So you can use this for both the colors to add shadows or depth. All right, for this card, I was thinking I would use a purple cardstock. And I do have a purple cardstock, but that's a local cardstock. So I thought I would use something that you would have access to. And I am going to use the solid cardstock Ultraviolet. And what I'm going to do is, of course, this is not an A2 cardstock, so I'm going to take these 2 panels, and these are quite vibrant. And this one is slightly dull in front of this. Obviously, I'll need to add a little bit of inking to this, probably Dark Night or Arctic Mountain to, reduce the intensity of the purple. I have cut a panel of a white cardstock. We can adhere the purple panels directly on the white cardstock panel that I have, and you might not even see the line in between. But let's make it interesting. What I'll do is I'll cut these into strips. You can cut it into thin strips, or depends on your preference. But first I will ink the panel using Dark Night Crisp Dye ink so that I can reduce the concentration, the vibrancy of the purple, and match it to the image that I have inked. I won't show you the entire process of this. It's just simple inking just to change the tone of the cardstock. Then I will cut the cardstock panels into strips of 1.5 lengthwise. Then I will use Dark Night Crisp Dye ink and apply the ink to the edges of the strips lengthwise using a mini blending brush. Next, I will apply glue tape onto the card panel, the base, and cover the entire panel with tape. Then start adhering the strips, starting from the center point. Then once I have covered all the strips, the entire panel, I'll cut off the excess and adhere the remaining strip on the leftover area, and my background is ready. I used instant dimension foam tape to adhere the image onto the card front, and I have adhered it slightly off the edge. I'll cut off the excess and then adhere the remaining wherever I think it looks best. I added the sentiment from the Build a Garden Sulfur Cosmos and also added some white splatters. Whatever leftover pieces there were of the image, I just added them all around the cardstock so that it looked fuller.
4 stunning floral cards made easy with Stampwheel 2.0 by Jaycee. In this tutorial, Jaycee uses the Stampwheel 2.0 to effortlessly create 4 beautiful floral cards from a single stamp panel. It's paired with stamping techniques and clean colouring methods to build rich, intricate floral designs without complicated setups. This approach is beginner-friendly, efficient, and yields professional-looking results every time.
I remember when the original Stampwheel came out, that Altenew billowing peonies and its coordinating stencil were all the craze. I thought the large floral images were so fun to color with the coordinating stencil, or any of the artistry by Altenew mediums, like woodless coloring pencils, Altenew artist markers, and even watercolor. But with the 7.5-inch platform size, you could really only do this single orientation here, and you had to trim down your cardstock panels to 7.5 inches square. But now with the Stampwheel 2.0, we have a large 9-inch square panel, and now there are so many more possibilities with the orientation of this big billowing peony, and you don't have to trim down your 8.5-inch panel because the side of the Stampwheel stage, this guide right here, comes off. So now your cardstock can overhang on the right side of your Stampwheel stage, enabling you to quickly mass produce cards. And I'll show you what I mean by that. On my Stampwheel stage, I'm going to position my cardstock, letting this right side overhang. Then with the Billowing Peonies outline stamp set, I'm going to find an orientation where I can cover the bottom segment of my panel. And once I'm happy with the placement, I can pick up my stamp with the flip plate, just like on the original Stampwheel. And until I can get my hands on a replacement sticky mat grid for the Stampwheel 2.0, I am going to do my best to keep my sticky mat grid free of blemishes. Instead of stamping the outline in a traditional black ink, I'm going to opt for a mid-tone brown ink. This is Mocha. And once I'm happy with my impression, and since I have this tape guide here, I can use it again to rotate my cardstock panel and bump the cardstock up to my guide and stamp my Billowing Peonies outline on this side of my cardstock. Again, I'm using Mocha fresh dye ink to stamp the outline of Billowing Peonies. So I'm happy with the placement of both of these images. Now I can start filling in this open area in the middle of my cardstock with some Build-A-Garden Breezy Petal images. Like all of the Build-A-Garden sets, there's an outline stamp, its coordinating stencil, and if you want to, you can choose to add the die set. Though it's not part of your normal subscription, I just love that you can quickly cut out the outlines of your stamped images, and sometimes you get the offset sentiment layers or some other embellishments that coordinate with your Build-A-Garden for that month. I will be using the add-on die set for this bundle, but really it's only for the sentiments. So right now I'm going to play around with the placement of where I want this bundle of flowers to go. And I'm using the stamp packaging as a way to plan the placement of this bundle, because I want to try to fill up as much of my card as I can in one go. And I'm looking at the A, B, and C cluster here, this larger one. And as I've experimented with making 4-in-1 cards on the Stampwheel 2.0, I found it really helpful to get like a clear acetate guide cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, so an A2 size panel, so I can make sure and overlay. So each of the 4 quadrants of my 8.5 by 11-inch sheet have a lot of interest on them. And I also don't want to awkwardly cut like large images like the Billowing Peonies. So this is just a good way to visualize what each of your 4 cards are going to look like. I'm going to remove my guide that I have here. I don't think I need it anymore. Then I'm going to reposition my cardstock using this top left corner as my stability guide. Then I think if I position this stamp just like so, I don't think I should have to mask any portion of this image as I stamp it. You'll see that it almost creeps up to my 4¼ inch side here. And again, this is why this guide is really helpful for me as I plan out these 4-in-1 cards. So I'm going to pick up my Breezy Petals outline stamp, stamp the outline again in Mocha. And once I'm happy with that impression, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, I should be able to rotate my panel 180 degrees, bump it into this top left corner, and without removing the stamp on my flip plate, I should be able to fill in this open area down here. Perfect. And this should finish at least the outline floral stamping on this large panel. So after I clean up my outline stamp, I should be ready for stenciling. So now I can transfer my 8.5 by 11 inch stamped sheet to my 9 by 12 sticky mat grid. So you might be wondering why you can't just do that on A2 size panels, 4 of them. And this is really the reason why, is because now that you have these large clusters, you can stencil this entire image in one go instead of in fragments. And like I demonstrated earlier, especially with the Billowing Peonies stamp set, you could really orient this image one way in the original stamp wheel. But now we can experiment, as you can see, with different orientations and different placements of this large image with the Stampwheel 2.0. It'll be mid to late November when this video publishes, so I thought I would experiment with a moody fall and winter palette. I'm starting with pink crystal on this peony, and since I have the same stencil out, I don't have to worry about cleaning it, because then I can rotate this stencil and position it on the other half of my panel. I'm using a mini ink blending brush to apply pink crystal, and I'm creating a halo of this color around the edge of the peony. So that finishes that layer. And the 9 by 12 inch sticky mat is perfect for 8.5 inch sheets, because as you can see, I still get a lot of overhang, well, enough overhang to adhere my stencil on without using any of the satin masking tape. On this peony, I'll use strawberry. And just like the previous flower, I'm just creating a halo of this color on the tips of the petals. I can orient my stencil really quickly and repeat the process. Again, I don't have to clean my stencil because I'm using the same color. So filling in this entire panel is going to work up really easily. And hopefully you can see the difference now, especially with this stencil, since both of the second layers are on this single stencil. So once I get the alignment just right on this image, and I'm worrying about this peony here, I used strawberry on this image, so then I'll move on to dusty pink. And on this layer, I'll use mauve. And I'll make sure not to cross over into my other peony right here that I just ink blended. So there's that layer. Then I can do the same thing on these two images. I'll keep going down the gradient of colors for each of the respective dye inks. So I know I'll need Blush Rose on this flower and Berrylicious on this one. So that's the end result of this layer. Then finally, I can work in the final color to both of these flowers using the number 5 stencil in Billowing Peonies. So that's Raspberry Sunset and Acai Berry. And that is those color layers on the other half of my panel. Then I can color the leaves on both of these images as well as the flower centers. So this is stencil layer number 6 for the leaves and these two centers. For a fall feeling foliage palette, I'm starting with Toasted Mauve. I like that this brown has red undertones to it. Kind of reminds me of how rose leaves, when they first bud, they have this sort of reddish undertone to them. And I've also got some burning bushes in my garden. And this is the overall impression that I'm getting for fall right now. So I'll keep those just on the leaves. Then for the peony center, I'll use Misty more. On these smaller bits on stencil number 6 for the flower center, I'll use Marshland. Then finally, I can move on to Redwood for the detail leaf layers. Then I'll jump all the way down to Mangrove Root for the peony flower centers. And that'll finish the billowing peonies sets of layering images. And of course, that just leaves the Breezy Petals layering stencil set for this center portion of my panel. And again, the really wonderful thing about these outline sets that have coordinating stencils is that I don't have to worry about grouping fragmented panels in order to color and ink blend. It's so much faster to do this all in one step than to have to do it 4 separate times, one time for each panel. So on the larger grouping of flowers on the number 1 layer stencil, I did strawberry, and I'll repeat the color palette that I used on the billowing peonies on the Breezy Petals Build-A-Garden, so that this is all a cohesive palette and so that it looks intentional as well. So then I can just repeat this on the other side. So that's the first layer, then I can do the second layer. I'll add a halo of dusty pink where I applied strawberry ink. And this is all on this number 2 stencil. Then wherever I applied pink crystal, I'll apply a layer of mauve. On the number 3 stencil, I'll apply blush rose to all of the open areas of the petals. To color in the base of the leaves of all of the images, in Build-A-Garden Breezy Petals, I'm going to use the Woodland Garden Altenew Artist Marker set and Toasted Mauve to quickly create a base layer on this entire panel. And filling in these layers takes no time at all. Then I can use the number 5 stencil to fill in the detail layers in the leaves, as well as all of the flower centers found in this set. So moving down from Toasted Mauve is Redwood. I'll fill in the flower centers to all of these images with a light touch of Mangrove Root. Then of course I can repeat this on the other side and fill in the detail layers of the leaves with Redwood. Of course, the more images that you stamp onto your 8.5-inch panel, the more you'll have to layer and stencil. But in the end, I can't think of a faster way to come up with 4 separate cards all at one time. Before I cut my panel apart, what I'm going to do to fill in some of these open areas is add some splatter. I have espresso watercolor brush marker refill, and I'll add brown splatter instead of jet black ink spray, my favorite way of adding splatter to any panel. I just think it gives a little bit more of that tea-stained antique look, and to me this is just a little bit more fitting for fall and winter. And no matter how much I mass produce cards, I seem to always run out during the holiday season. So for me, any technique that I can use to take the mundane task out of creating 4 of the same card, I just want to make sure I can pass that information on to you all and what I've learned along the way. So I think this needs just a little bit more splatter. The espresso splatter is really meant to fill in the open areas or the gaps that I have in between the bouquets, but pure white ink spray is what's going to give that dreamy halo or that frosted sort of look on these flowers. So this is pure white ink spray on a fine-tipped Altenew water brush. To save myself some time while this dries, I'm going to go ahead and get some sentiments ready. And like I mentioned, I'm using the Breezy Petals add-on die set just for the sentiments. You can stamp directly on your panels if that's what you choose. But I love when a stamp set like the Build-A-Garden Breezy Petals has the coordinating offset dies to create really refined sentiment banners. I cut apart my panel into 4¼ by 5.5-inch quadrants. And now you'll see I'm left with an array of different backgrounds that I can use for my sentiments. Like I mentioned, I used the Breezy Petals sentiments and the coordinating die set, and now I can find various places to tuck in these sentiments on all 4 of my panels. I foam mounted all of the sentiments to their respective panels, and that finishes an easy way to create 4 cards using 1 panel. Get your hands on the Stampwheel 2.0 and look at your stash for outline stamps that have coordinating stencils in clusters, and you'll be sure to finish your next batch of cards in a breeze.
If you have a small die cutting machine. Glitter Without the Mess by Michelle. Michelle shows how to add glittery sparkle to your tags without the mess by using materials like glitter cardstock instead of loose glitter. She shares simple techniques so you can easily achieve stunning shine with minimal tools and cleanup. It's a fast, clean and beginner-friendly way to make your paper craft shine.
So this is the new beautiful shimmering short glitter cardstock set. There is 4 colours in this set, all beautiful, got some kind of like aqua tones to them. I absolutely love the sparkle on this cardstock. It doesn't shed, it's great for die cutting, which is what I'm going to be using it for today. I'm taking the Bird of the Mountain die set. This is a great set. The bird is quite large, so it does take quite centre stage on a card, which is excellent. So I'm going to cut some of the layers from the glitter cardstock and some of them from regular cardstock. So I'm just taking all of the pieces here that I need for the bird. There is the instructions on the back of how you want to layer them together. I'm taking the gradient cardstock set in Seashore, and these are also aquatones. They're going to work quite well with the glitter cardstock. You can see that I use this pack a lot. I keep all of my little scraps inside there as well. Keep every last little bit of this cardstock because it's great for die cutting. So I'm taking the body of the bird, kind of like the main part of the bird, and I'm cutting that from the lightest shade of that Seashore cardstock set. I'm then taking the second layer and I'm going to cut that from the darkest shade in that Seashore set. And I'm also going to cut one of the feather pieces as well for the wing. So I'm just holding these down with some low tack tape. I'm just getting everything ready to start with, and then I can run everything through my die cutting machine in one go. I'm then cutting the legs, the beak and the eye from black cardstock, and then I'm cutting some of the feather pieces for the wings and then also kind of like the top of the bird's head from that glitter cardstock, and I'm using the 2 middle shades for that. So one of them is cut from the lighter part of the glitter cardstock and one of them is cut from the darker shade of glitter cardstock. So just cutting those pieces down. I do hold the dies down on the glitter paper with low tack tape, but to be honest with you, it's not going to stick to glitter cardstock. However, I do find that as I'm running it through, it just helps a little bit to keep them in place. I'm then taking some leaves and I'm cutting those from the darkest shade in the Shimmering Shore glitter set. This has got a little bit more of a green tone to it, and I'm using the leaves from the Crafter Flower Open Peony layering die set. These are one of my favourite sets of leaves. So I've run all of that through my die cutting machine, and I do want the body of the bird to be cut another 2 times from white cardstock so that I can layer those on top of each other to create some dimension. I don't want to adhere my bird down with foam tape, but I did still want some dimension, and the easiest way to do that for me personally is to cut some different layers of cardstock, and that's just going to pop that bird up a little bit higher than it would be if I was adhering it completely flat, if it was just the one layer. So I've adhered those 2 white layers together to start with using some liquid glue. That helps me have a little bit of time to wiggle the pieces together to try and line them up as best as possible. So I can pop that piece down there for the kind of, like I say, main body of the bird, and then I'm adhering the tail down on top using that glitter cardstock. And these colours just work really nicely together. I'm then placing the top of the bird on top of that, and I'm just using that arrow there that's cut from all of the layers to line them all up. But they do line up really quite easily. Because I'm adhering down onto glitter cardstock, it is going to take a little while for that glue to dry. So I'm just using a block there just to hold that down while the glue dries. I can then add some more glue onto the back of this piece here, and then I can pop that in place. And again, I can use that arrow to line the pieces up. So just popping that down in place. And then I've got the bottom piece of the wing here, again using that arrow to line that up. And then for the top piece, I'm just lining it up with the kind of feather itself so that it all lines up nicely. For the legs, it did take me a little while to get these in place, and I had to cut that out of the video because I really had to lean over. But again, it's really good with that liquid glue because I've got time to sort of wiggle them in place. And then I can do the same thing here for the beak and then also the eye. I then want to stamp a sentiment, so I'm taking a piece of Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock, and I'm taking the sentiment strips to stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that down onto the cardstock using the stamp wheel. This is one of my favourite sets of sentiments. I really love that there are so many in the set that you can pick from. So I'm taking the top of the stamp wheel here, the flip plate, popping that in place to pick up that stamp, and then I can flip that over and ink that up with obsidian pigment ink. I can then flip that plate back over and pop that in place in the stamp wheel to press that stamp down onto the cardstock. And I got a really nice impression first time, so I didn't need to repeat that stamping. I am going to set that aside to dry for a little while because it is pigment ink. It does take a little while to dry. I've got a card base here that's cut to 4 inches across by 5.5 inches tall. So I've cut a little bit off of the side of a standard sized A2 card base so that I can have some pieces hanging off the side of the card base, but it's still going to fit in a standard sized envelope. I've cut a tag using the Terrific Tags die set from the same Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock that I used to make the card base. I'm going to use this tag as kind of like a grounding for the rest of the pieces here. So I'm taking the leaves first of all, I'm adding some liquid glue onto the back of those, and I am cutting some of them down a little bit with scissors just so that none of the excess pieces are going to stick out where I don't want them to be. So I can add that liquid glue onto the back, and then I'm using tweezers here just to help me pop that in place. So I'm going to have some of the leaves on top of the tag and some of them below the tag. Just creates a little bit more movement and interest onto the card. So I can just pop that in place, and I'm just taking my time here. Again, I'm using that liquid glue, so I've got that time to sort of wiggle things in place where I want them to be. So I'm definitely more of a die cutter at the moment. I love stamping and I will always love stamping, but I'm definitely gravitating towards die cuts at the moment. I just find them really lovely to use, and I just for some reason happen to really love layering die sets in particular. So I do like kind of creating scenes and things like that with the die cuts. Let me know what you're into at the moment. I definitely go through phases with die cutting and stamping, but at the moment I think I'm team die cutting. So let me know if you're team die cutting, team stamping. You could be team pressing if you wanted to. You could be team foiling. Let me know in the comments what you're up to at the moment. So I've added that leaf onto the tag there, and I'm taking some instant dimension foam tape and popping that on the back of the tag. I can then add some twine through the top of the tag. I don't really need to necessarily add the twine through the top of the tag because I'm not using it to kind of adhere onto anything as such. I am just using this tag as kind of like I say, a grounding or sort of a base layer, but I'm not that keen on having nothing through the whole of the tag. That's just my thing, so I did want to add some twine through it, and I do think adding a bow to any card is always a nice touch. So I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can press that down onto the card. I'm then adding some more liquid glue onto the back of the bird, and I'm just adding it towards the centre of the bird because the head and the tail are going to overlap that tag. So just popping that down so that his legs are at the bottom of the tag so that it looks like he is perching on that tag. And then I can just wiggle that in place so that it is straight. I did think about adding some foam tape behind the bird's tail, but because that is 4 layers of cardstock high, or kind of thick I should say, it is quite sturdy, so I didn't think I really needed it. I am adding some foam tape onto the back of the sentiment strip though. I've added 3 layers onto the left hand side and 1 layer onto the right hand side, so that is going to line up straight with all of these different layers I've got here on my card. So I'm using a T-square ruler here just to help me pop that down in place. I just tend to sort of place it down to start with, and then I do wiggle it around a little bit to make sure that that's straight. And so that is the card finished for today. Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't add so much glitter cardstock onto a card, but I did die cut those leaves with non-glittered cardstock, and then I tried it with the glitter cardstock, and I just thought that they were so pretty cut from the glitter cardstock that I had to go all out with the glitter on my card today.
Spotlight Colouring by Michelle. Michelle introduces the spotlight colouring technique, a brilliant way to draw attention to specific areas of your design, like shining a spotlight on a stage. She uses dyes to create precise shapes for selective colouring, and then applies watercolour blended with dual tip pens to fill only those spotlighted circles with vibrant hues. The coloured circles are layered back into the panel for a seamless dimensional effect, finished with a simple sentiment and a tag accent. It's visually striking, easy for beginners, and requires just basic tools to achieve a polished result.
Since it's National Colouring Book Day, I'm using the Botanical Elegance watercolour colouring book. There are lots of images in this book. They are printed onto watercolour paper, but there is another book that is cardstock if you wanted to use like pencils or markers or anything like that. Today I'm doing watercolouring, so that's why I'm using the watercolouring book. I'm kind of making this as a bit of a shortcut because you could absolutely do this with a stamped image, but since I've got this book full of lots of lovely images, I may as well utilise it and not have to go through the process of stamping out my image. So I've picked the one I like, and I think this is Cosmos. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's Cosmos. I do want to cut this down into an A2 size panel because that's what's going to be my finished card size. So I've got a template here that's cut from some plastic, and I'm using that to guide where I want to cut this down. So I'm just grabbing my pencil there and making some marks where the corners are going to be, and I've taken that to my guillotine and cut that down. I'm now grabbing the halftone circles nesting die set, and I'm using this to create my spotlights for my spotlight colouring. I'm literally creating spotlights here with the circles, but you could do this in lots of different shapes. You could maybe create a rectangle in the centre and have the outside edges be without colour, or you could kind of cut a shape in the centre and have that colour be with colour and then the outside be without. I quite like doing the circles because it means that I can have different areas that are coloured in on this panel and not just have one area coloured in, but it's definitely personal preference. So I've placed these circles down onto my panel. I'm holding them down with some low tack tape, and then I can run those through my die cutting machine. I do want to keep the circles and the background, so I'm just being careful here to remove those carefully from that background piece. I then want to cut some circles from watercolour paper, and I'm going to cut these multiple times so that I can layer them up one on top of each other to create some dimension behind the ones that I'm going to colour in. You could do this with foam tape instead of adding lots of layers of cardstock, but I thought it would just look a little bit neater with the layers of cardstock. And I did watercolour paper here just so that the papers match in terms of colour. I'm then going to bring in the dual tip pens to colour in my images. So I'm starting off with the Tahitian Terrace set, and I want to grab some pinks from these sets and also some yellows for the centres and then green for the leaves. This is the Islands of Fiji set. And then I've got the Zanzibar set there at the bottom. And then I can grab that last light pink. I've got the petal palette and then also some water and some fine watercolour brushes. I'm using a size 4 and a size 2 today. I'm going to grab the lightest shade of pink, which is baby pink, and I'm going to scribble that down onto my palette. I can then wet my brush with some water and then bring that to that pen that I've scribbled on top. And it's going to create kind of like a watercolour. You can use these pens as is, but since they are water-based, I thought I would use them as a watercolouring medium today. So I'm going in onto my image here and I'm trying to focus most of the darker colour towards the sort of centre or the base of these petals, and then I'm going to lighten it up as I go towards the tip of the petals. I'm starting off with a kind of wet on dry technique. As I go along, I switch and go to wet on wet, and you'll see why in a little while. So I'm starting off kind of like a base layer of this light pink. Now, ordinarily when kind of watercolouring images like this, you would really want to kind of leave a petal in between in case the colours sort of mix together. Since I'm going in with such light colours at this point in time, it doesn't really matter too much. But as I go onto the image, I do tend to skip ones. I'm not using a huge amount of water here, so it is drying quite quickly, but I don't really want them to kind of blend into each other, especially if I've got lighter areas and darker areas. So I've gone in with the base layer of those two petals there, and now I'm bringing in fuchsia, which is just a little bit darker and it's a little bit more of a vibrant pink as well. I can mix that with some water and then I can bring that to my image here. So I'm going to again focus that darker colour towards the base of the petal, and then I'm also kind of bringing it in this petal to the left hand side as well. I just thought that it would be a little bit darker there, kind of nestled behind the other petals. So I can go in where I think the area is going to be darkest, and then I can wet my brush and blend that out. And it is easier to blend wet on wet, which is why I kind of moved to that technique a little bit later. As for now, I'm going in, and because the base layer of the lighter pink is almost dry at this point, they're not blending that well. So it is taking me a little while to try and sort of blend those colours out a little bit. I don't want the whole petal being this darker shade. So you can see here that I go back into my water and then try and blend that out a little bit there on the right hand side. And then I did want a little bit of extra darkness there, so I go back in adding a little bit more colour. And this time I'm going to go in with a wet on wet technique. So I have wetted the entire area of that petal, and now I can bring in this lighter shade of pink, and it's going to blend out so much better. Sometimes it depends on the medium how well the colours will blend. These aren't watercolours, like they're not tube watercolours, so they do take a little bit more effort to blend out than say a watercolour tube, but I do really like using them. I do find that these kind of dye pigments do produce kind of like a brighter image, which is quite nice, like a little bit more vibrancy to them. So here you can see, like I said, I'm missing out some of the petals and then going in with which ones that I think will be a bit drier. So I did kind of go petal to petal at this point, but you could go over the whole area if you wanted to. It kind of like in one layer of the light pink and then go in with the dark pink. I'm just figuring out there which areas I need to leave to be green. I didn't want to accidentally go over where it was supposed to be the green leaves. It is a little bit difficult to see, obviously, because I've cut this out into this shape, but it's really helpful because in that watercolouring book, you've got one kind of image that is got dark black outlines, which is what I'm using today. And then you've got another one with a kind of slightly lighter grey outline. And so I've still got that one that I can use for reference, which is really helpful. Otherwise, I could just pop this circle back into the background and then I'd be able to see a little bit easier where the areas are that are supposed to be the foliage. So I got a little bit too much water there onto that petal, so I'm just dabbing that off with a cloth, and then I can go in again with that colour. So I'm just going to finish off colouring in all of those petals, and then I can go in with a slightly darker shade, which is Rubellite. I'm going to start off, because the area is all dry at this point, I'm going to start off with quite a wet mixture. I'm going to add it over the top again where I want that darkness to be. And this isn't a huge amount darker than what's already there. I am going to blend that out with some clean water. And then I'm going to scribble some more of that marker down and then pick that up with that wet brush. And that's going to make that quite a lot darker. But because my base layer was already dry, I wanted to make sure that I could then go in with the wet on wet technique again, just because these can be very vibrant. And so it's a little bit harder to blend them out. So that worked quite well, this technique for me. And then again, I can just try and blend that out. And then I can just do the same thing for the rest of this circle here. Just trying to add the darker colours kind of like into those nooks and crannies where it would be darkest naturally. So I've gone in and done all of the petals on these pieces, and now I can colour in this flower centre, and I'm using Fresh Lemon and Snapdragon. So I've switched to a size 2 brush here, and I'm going in first with a layer of the Fresh Lemon. Some of the pink did overlap this flower centre a little bit, so I'm going to try and add the darker colour with that Snapdragon in those places where it has overlapped a little bit, and it's just going to kind of create a little bit more shadow. So I can now go in with that Snapdragon, and I want it to be darker sort of towards the base of this flower centre and then kind of around the outside edges. And then I can mix the two together as well if I want a slightly lighter shade, or kind of a middle shade, I suppose. And then for the foliage, I'm using Bamboo, Grass Field, and then I realised at this point that that's a little bit lighter than I expected. Once I do add the water to it, it does darken up a little bit, but I did bring in Emerald, which is a little bit more of like a teal kind of green, and just to make some areas a little bit darker. So I've gone in with that water to start with, and now I can go in with Bamboo, and I want to try and make some of these areas a little bit lighter and some of them a little bit darker. I didn't want it to be all one flat colour. And again, I'm using that size 2 brush just because those areas are quite small. I can then kind of mix the emerald and the grass field together, and then I do scribble a little bit more of that grass field down to see if I can get a little bit more from that colour. So just trying to create a little bit of interest here with the 3 different shades of green. Because there's not a huge amount of colour on this finished card, obviously it's just in these 3 circles, I wanted to try and make them kind of as vibrant as possible. So I can just finish off with a little bit more of that emerald. And then I can fill in these tiny little gaps here where they're supposed to be green, where the stem is of the flower. And then also there's a little bit of kind of a leaf poking through as well. And then I can set those aside to dry. I've then got my background piece. I'm adding some glue tape onto the back of that. Making sure to add quite a lot of that. Want to make sure that this sticks down really nicely. And then because there are a few areas that I couldn't quite get to with that glue tape, I'm going in with some liquid glue just to make sure that everything's going to be stuck down nicely. And then it also gives me a little bit of time to wiggle it in place and try and line it up perfectly on this A2 size card base. So that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. If the panel is a little bit smaller than the outside or a little bit larger, I can take it to my guillotine and cut the edges down, but thankfully it pretty much fitted quite nicely. So just pressing that down, making sure that that's well stuck down. And then I can bring in my circle pieces. And like I say, this is just going to add a little bit of dimension to the circles, just so that I'm not sticking them back down in completely flat. For this small circle here, I can adhere them all one on top of each other and then add that into the opening. So adding some liquid glue there, and then I can pop that down. And just making sure that that's in perfectly. And then for these other 2 ones, I do want to add them one at a time because I want to cut off the excess from the side. And it's a little bit easier to cut 1 layer of cardstock at a time rather than trying to cut 3 layers of watercolour paper. So I'm just trying to line that up as best as possible, making sure that that's well stuck down, and then I can flip that over and use the edge of my card base here to where I want to cut with my scissors. And I didn't cut that quite perfectly, so I'm just going to go back in and cut that little piece off. And then I can do the exact same thing and add another layer on top. And I'm going to do 3 layers for each of the circles. Lay that on top and then cut off the excess. I can then add some liquid glue onto the back of the pieces that I added the watercolouring on. So I'm placing that down to start with, and then I do lean right over here to try and make sure that I'm lining up those lines of the image. So this is kind of a bit like spotlight colouring as well as the eclipse technique, because you are kind of popping that up and then popping it back on top. So it's a little bit of both techniques, which is quite good. This one was a little bit easier for me to line up because I've got that edge of the card there. But I'm using that liquid glue, so I've got time to wiggle it in place. And then for this circle here at the bottom, I thought it'd be quite fun to make it into a tag. So I'm just trying to make sure that that's lined up, and then I can bring in my pencil and just make a little mark there towards the top where I want to punch a hole with my handheld punch. So I can just punch a hole there, just to remove any excess pencil marks with an eraser. And then I realised as I was going to pop this on top that you would see through that hole there. And I wanted to just add a little bit of pink. So I'm bringing back my palette and just adding a little bit of that colour there behind, just so that it's not kind of poking through as white. It didn't end up being the exact right tone, but it is, I think, still better being pink than white. I can then thread some twine through the top of this now, which is a tag, and tie that in a bow. So I'm just going to fiddle with that bow for a little while, trying to get it the size that I want. I can then add some more liquid glue onto the back of this piece. And then line that up with the image on the card. And again, this one was a little bit easier because I've got that straight line there at the bottom. And then I realised at this point that I didn't want the bow to be quite as big as I had made it. So I'm just making that a little bit smaller and then cutting those tails down with some scissors. I have then stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from the Sentiment Strips 3 stamp set. And I want to add a little bit of dimension onto this, but I didn't want to add it with foam tape because I've already got quite a lot of layers of cardstock. So I'm going to cut a piece of Crafty Necessities Jet Black cardstock, which is what I used for the sentiment itself. And I can just add a layer of that onto the back. I'm just adhering that down with a little bit of liquid glue. And that's just going to mean that it's popped up a little bit, but it's not kind of two-dimensional. And then I can add some more liquid glue onto the back of that and adhere that down onto the card. And I'm just going to bring in my T-square ruler just to try and line that up perfectly. And I just needed to wiggle that a little bit to make that straight. And then to finish off, I'm going to add some clear iridescent stellar sequins, just to add a little bit of sparkle onto the card and a little bit more added interest. So I'm just adding small dabs of glue onto my images here. And then I can pick up those sequins with my Perfect Picker and pop those in place. And I'm just using a few different sizes here. And that is the card finished for today. I really love having those spotlights of the colouring and then the rest of it be left blank.
Boost your cards with acrylic markers by Therese. Therese demonstrates 3 super simple acrylic marker techniques: layered colouring, fine line detailing and blending to transform plain cardstock into vibrant thank you cards. Even with minimal tools, these methods deliver bold, eye-catching results with ease, perfect for beginner crafters.
Add colour to die cuts, and this works particularly well on floral images. I'm only adding 1 shade of colour here because I want a white flower with a yellow sort of centre of the petals, so I'm focusing the acrylic marker in the centre of the petals and just flicking it outwards. You can add as many colours as you want. You could even die cut the flower petals in some coloured cardstock to begin with, and then use a white acrylic marker to add a white centre. And when I was doing the centre portions of the flowers, I did decide to come in and add some of the marker to the edge of the die cuts, just so that that white cut edge didn't show when I layer them up. And I do want to add some dimension to the petals, so I'm using just a pen here to roll the cardstock, and that'll just give it a little bit of shape. This is optional. If you want your flower to be flatter, then you don't need to do this step. So this particular set has 4 different flowers in it, and Really easy to use because they have the keyhole guide, which just makes layering a dream. They are all numbered, but if you're not sure, the packaging also has the assembly instructions on it as well. I always like to use a liquid glue when I'm assembling these sort of die cut layers because there's only such a small amount of space to adhere them together, and I know that's got a really strong hold and it's going to keep my flower together through the post. And I'm just following the guide and layering up all 3 flowers. What I do like about these layers with the keyhole is that it even tells me where I need to put the center of the flower. It has a base guide and then I just have to adhere the centerpiece over top. It makes it so very easy. So we've already done one technique with this idea. When I did the first card, that was all on an embossed image. This is also an embossed image. It's a vase. It comes in the same Craft Your Life kit of supplies, and I thought it went well with the magnolia flower. I am adding a couple of layers, just doing some really speedy colouring here with the acrylic markers and not being too careful on the edges here because I do want to make sure that they're coloured in because I'm going to be cutting this out with a pair of scissors. Even when I was colouring the larger portions here, I just used some simple line strokes to fill the area in and it dried beautifully. I think it kind of almost looks like a ceramic vase. And I came in with the marker on the edge as well, just so I didn't see the cut edges here. And I also added a bit of dimension. Now this is quite big, this vase, so I just used one of the actual markers themselves because I'm going to pop this up. So I'm working on coloured cardstock again, tip bonus idea, and we're up to our 3rd technique now, and we're doing some freehand drawing directly onto the cardstock. Now, you don't have to be an artist to do this. I'm literally just drawing some leaf shapes, nice long thin leaves. I'm just using my vase and flowers as a guide. You can add as many or as few leaves. You can add short, round leaves. You can add long, thin ones. You can even add some twigs, berries, little flowers. I thought about doing some little white flowers in the background. They would have been really pretty, but I'd already finished the card. So then maybe next time. And again, I came in with the dark blue to add some shading to the leaves and also to ground the vase. These are so much fun to colour with and really easy to use. I just kept drawing with them. So I added dimension to the vase and also popped the flowers in place. You can use these markers to colour like leaf images, even twigs, like die cut ones. You can use them to colour images, stamped images. They're so much fun. Oh, and here's a thing. I also used the silver pen. This, you can't see it in the video so much, but in real life, this is so glittery and shiny. It's beautiful. So I added a couple of layers. That pen, there's also a gold one, which is really pretty, but I haven't tried the black one yet. That looks really interesting. And like I said, I couldn't stop playing with these pens, so I did add some dots and some more dots to the background. Popped up a sentiment. This one comes from the same set. It's really, the fonts in this set are really pretty as well. They are a bit on the larger side, so they really can make a statement on a card.
If you have a large die cutting machine. Arch Foliage by Erica. In this tutorial, Erica demonstrates how to use the Arch Foliage Craft Your Life project kit to make 2 textured cards. She shares 2 straightforward techniques to build rich tactile interest with minimal tools. Both approaches are beginner friendly and deliver standout texture with ease. Today I thought we would have a look at the absolutely gorgeous Arched Foliage Craft Your Life kit. So let's open this. And this kit comes in one of these storage sleeves, so that's always good to have. So first off, we have a gorgeous 3D embossing folder called, well, this is called Arched Foliage, right? So it creates this like stunning sort of textured background. Then we have this gorgeous big stamp, and it's got some really great sentiments in it as well. So there is surround yourself with people who feel like sunshine, just a note, and it's just beautiful. Right, we also have a coordinating die cut, and also coordinating layering stencils. And I thought we would create this or recreate that. And we are going to use the actual ink colors in the suggestion. So we're going to use some permanent black. We are also going to be using some Desert Night and the Morning Frost. We are also going to be using Sweet Leaf. And we are going to ink blend this with the layering stencils. Hold our paper in place, we are going to use the new 9 by 9 inches, the skinny, ultra sticky pen. Oh, hello, you can see my face in the plastic. And this is super, super sticky. So we are going to put this down, and then we're going to put a piece of cardstock there, and then we're just going to get ink blending. So with these, we're going to speed this up just a little bit now. With these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like keep an eye on where the actual lines are, and then we are going to start with our Sweet Leaf. I'm going to be using a new ink blending tool in this one because I've not used the Sweet Leaf before. So we are going to kind of create or recreate the kind of the inspiration look on the back of the packaging. So we are going to use this Sweet Leaf green, and then also the Desert Night ink. So we're going to use both of the stencils for this arched sort of the foliage part, and we are going to use both colors on both layers. And the reason we're going to do this is to kind of create a really fun sort of almost glowy look. Now these two colors work so incredibly beautifully together. Now we're going to peel off stencil number 1, and we're going to go for stencil number 2. So we are going to use the etched outlines on the stencil to make sure that we put everything into place, and then we are also going to make sure that it's lining up with where we put our first stencil. So that is easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to do the two ink colors together. We're going to do it kind of like a little bit all over the place, so not like completely even. We want the two colors to blend into each other so that you get that kind of, it's almost like a bit of an ethereal look with the two colors on each leaf. You know, what if you wanted to do one color per stencil, you know, obviously do whatever you feel like your creativity where it's taking you. Just listen to that like little voice in your head, especially if it's like raring to go and like, woo, let's do this. But if you wanted to recreate this look, you do the two colors a little bit here and a little bit there, and then you kind of go over with one of the colors again to kind of blend those two colors together, and then you end up with something like this. Okay, that was super cool look. I really love how this turned out. Now I thought while we were on a roll and we had those stencils out, why not do another one? Now I did first think I was going to be using the Stampwheel 2.0 grippy mat, but because my piece of cardstock is actually 8.5 by 8.5, there wasn't really much space left on the sticky mat for the stencil to hold on to. So we are going to be using a little bit of the purple masking tape. So when you're using this technique here, what you might want to do is line up your corners. So on one side of the paper, whichever one, you line up your corners and make sure that those are perfectly aligned, and then that is how you remember where to put your stencil next. So as long as you stick to the same corner, make sure that is where, that's like your reference point, you're going to be good to go. Now we're going to be doing a little bit of a rainbow, and we are going to be starting with Citrus Burst, which is our yellow color. And the reason I start with yellow is because generally that's when I do a rainbow, that's the one that's going to go in the middle, and I feel like yellow is probably the
hardest to kind of keep light. That's probably the best way of putting it. So yellow is kind of like a color that just gets dirty really, really easily if you add too much color. So I tend to put down yellow first, and then I go with my other colors from there on. So we're going to go from top to bottom. We're going to do Sea Breeze, Sweet Leaf, Citrus Burst, Baby Pink, and Wisteria. And this is a really, really, really simple kind of ink blending technique, so you don't have to kind of go in and worry about any details or anything like that. We're just going to go in with a soft layer for your first one, and then we're going to place our stencil. We're going to line it up there in the right hand bottom corner, and then in the top right hand corner, and then we're going to place our tape back down, and we are just going to keep on ink blending. So here we are again, just doing exactly the same thing in almost exactly the same place as well. So every single color is going to go in about the same area. So we still want a really nice kind of gradient blending into each other. So the colors will still kind of go very, no, ombre is not the right word, obviously, because this is a rainbow, but we do want them to kind of blend in together as well as possible for a really soft kind of beautiful look. And then on one of the layers, what you can do is just go in like a little bit heavier with some of the colors here and there, just to kind of like add a little bit of zhuzh and pizzazz, you know. And then we're going to peel off the tape, and we're going to take off the stencil, and we're going to have a look at the gorgeousness. Okay, that turned out pretty cool, didn't it? So with this, we are now going to pop the sticky mat and the whole piece of paper. We're going to stick that back into our Stampwheel 2.0. And then we are going to take a lot of time to make sure that we are lining up our stamp in the perfect place. So this part is a little bit sped up, but in reality, I spent close to a minute checking every single leaf, every little one, and we are adjusting, we are taking our time, we are going to make sure that this is exactly where it needs to go, and then we're going to pick it up with our lid, and we're going to stamp. So this is slightly nerve-wracking, because if you mess up, that is it. Pretty much, you know, I mean, you can maybe kind of cut it out, and in some areas, you know, you can always put a big sentiment on there, or, you know, cover it up, but this worked out pretty good. So that time spent making sure that the stamp was lined up was well spent. Look at that. I'm so happy with how that turned out. Now, I did use a Silverstone ink rather than black, because I wanted like a really soft look with the rainbow. But yeah, oof, so good, so good. I am absolutely loving this stamp set and this layering set. It's just so gorgeous. Now with the coordinating die cut, I did die cut that off camera, and then I managed to knock my camera a little bit, so you can see that the footage is slightly skewered, and I don't like it, but I will be fixing that in a little bit. Now we are going to take our gorgeous 3D embossing folder, and we are going to emboss some paper. Now I did do both one in, I think, Morning Frost, or I will have to double check the name of the cardstock, but it's one of the super soft gray ones. And I have also done one in white. So we are going to, on the Platinum 6, so this is the machine I have a Spellbinders Platinum 6. On the sort of platform basis here, it will tell you exactly what you need in order to either die cut or emboss like we're doing, or 3D embossing folder. And it is so easy. It runs through so simple, and there's no kind of crazy arm workout when you do it properly, which I didn't used to, and I was wondering why that was so difficult. But that was piece of cake, and we still end up with absolutely stunningly detailed embossed images here, or embossed cardstock, sorry. Now we are going to be ink blending a little bit here on this one, and I do believe that I am using the Morning Frost ink. I could have maybe gone for a slightly darker one to kind of help speed along the process a little bit. And it does look a little bit blotchy here, but just bear in mind that, you know, it's going to need a little bit of time to dry. And so I'm not super worried about it, because once this is dried and kind of settled into the paper, it's going to be much, much smoother. Now, I did kind of obviously I realized a little bit sooner, but so this arched foliage branch, it is a little bit too big for an A2. So we are going to be very, very, very brave. Yes, we're going to be very brave indeed. And we are going to be doing a little bit of surgery on this later on. Yes, we are. Now, I will be also stacking and stamping and stacking some sentiments for our cards. So these are all from the stamp set themselves. And I decided to stamp up thank you and hugs. Now, one of those, this one here, I kind of, when I die cut it, it just slipped a little bit. So it wasn't kind of perfect. So I stamped a new one. And then I used that die cut to just stack my sentiment, because I do like a good raised stacked sentiment. It just adds a little something, doesn't it? You know, I just really like how it looks. But I thought what I would do is I would glue these together with the new glue coming very, very soon. And now, are you ready? Are you sitting down? Are you feeling brave? Whew, you haven't had too much caffeine, have you? We are going to get our little scissors. We're going to take a deep, deep breath. And then we're going to cut this. Yes, we are. Okay. I was so nervous to do this, especially after, you know, having ink blended and then, you know, taking all of that time to make sure that my stamp was perfectly lined up with the ink blending. And then, you know, number 3, we actually got the die cut to cut out perfectly as well. And now I am here with the scissors, chopping. I mean, oh, goodness me, okay. Whew. Yeah, it was a little bit stressful, not gonna lie. But I really wanted to get as much of this onto my card as possible, because it really just turned out so stunning. And with that sort of soft gray background and all of that like gorgeous texture, I really wanted to just, yeah, use as much of it as possible, because it just seemed like a shame to not, you know, squeeze it all in there. Now, of course, I could have I could have done the clever thing, and I could have done like a slimline card where I wouldn't have had to cut it, maybe cut it in half and like put a sentiment in the middle, and all of a sudden I'm like, why didn't you do that? But I don't know. But we're here now, so, you know, I know I've already got this, so we are, you know, we're committed to this now. We are. So I did decide to cut off just a tiny bit more, because again, I wanted to get as much color in as possible of all of the colors there. But the yellow part was a tad big, maybe, and I just felt like, you know, I could afford to kind of lose a little bit of that. So we are performing a lot of surgery on this, but spoiler alert, it works out in the end. So, you know, there's actually not that much of a need for me to be so dramatic about this, but hopefully this is keeping you at the edge of your seat and like you're invested now, so you will stay and watch the rest of this card making. But now we are going to take all of these bits and pieces and we are going to place them onto the background, and then we're going to glue all of this down. And then our cute little sentiment just fit perfectly in that kind of like little opening on the card, doesn't it? Now, I did actually do the other card very similar, and you know, we're going to need to trim it a little bit here and there, but I didn't show you the other card sort of being finished off, because I just essentially did the same thing. So I ink blended and then stamped, but with black ink, and then I've done the same 3D embossing folder but with colored cardstock. And then we have added a sentiment, but then that one actually got like a strip of a sentiment as well. So it says hugs. And then the lovely quote from Maya Angelou that says, "Nothing can dim the light that shines from within." Now, I am going to add a few. And okay. So maybe I need to confess straight up here that a few for me, I mean, I think that this was like a few. I can see, you know, plenty of spaces where I can add more sequins, but this is like a normal yellowish sprinkling of sequins for me. So yeah, okay. No, I'm gonna stick with that actually. And if you have seen like sneak peeks of these gorgeous sequins coming, but you don't know which ones to get, which ones will probably work best with like the majority of your projects, these clear iridescent ones are stunning. They just work so well with so many different projects. Now, if you're not a huge fan of iridescent, there's also the sparkling diamond. So they are completely clear, and they, oh, let me tell you, wow. They're absolutely stunning and beautiful, and I can highly recommend them. Now, I am loving the fact that there are 6 different sizes in these packages, so that you will have sequins and embellishments that will work for every single project that you will do. So this is our 1 card done, and here is our second. So the gray one, I say the gray one like, well, like the orange or book gray, but I have added or raised the blue and green ones with a little bit of instant dimension foam tape as well, just to have like a little bit of a different look. And that one is just completely done like directly onto a A2 panel.
Faux Velvet 3D Embossing by Michelle. In this tutorial, Michelle elevates thank you tags by combining 3D embossing and ink blending with a white pigment ink pounce technique to achieve soft, faux velvet texture. The light shimmery splay adds a dreamy glow, and the simple stamped sentiment finishes the card. It's a beginner-friendly method that delivers luxe results with minimum effort.
I'm using the Craft Your Life project kit Garden Whispers today. In the kit, you get a stamp set with beautiful images and lots of sentiments. There is the coordinating die set, the 3D embossing folder, which is what I'm focusing on today, and also coordinating stencils. The stencils do coordinate with both the embossing folder and the stamp set. I'm creating a tag today, so I have cut one of the larger Terrific Tags dies from Classic Crest £110 Solar White cardstock. I've placed that down onto my sticky mat, and now I can add some ink blending on top using the Bubblegum Dreams Fresh Dye Ink collection and a small blending brush. I want to focus most of the darker colour towards the bottom and also the left-hand side of this tag. So I'm starting off with the lightest shade, and my tag is adhered really nicely onto that sticky mat, but unfortunately my sticky mat is moving on my craft mat that's underneath it. So I do apologise that I'm having to try and keep that in place as best as possible as I'm doing the ink blending. Most of the time it does stick really nicely to my craft mat, but I've probably got a little bit of dust or something like that on it, and so it's not sticking so well today. I went in with a light layer of the lightest shade, and now I'm going in with the second lightest shade, focusing this darker colour towards the bottom and that left hand side, as I said. I do want to try and get a really nice transition between all of the 3 shades, but at this point I'm not too concerned with how sort of smooth it looks. I'm bringing in the embossing folder so I can see how far up I want that darker ink to be. And I feel that it needs to go up a little bit higher on this tag, and I'm just going to have the very top right hand corner be the lightest shade. I can then go in with what is the second darkest shade in the collection. I'm not using the darkest shade today. And again, I'm just really darkening up those areas towards the bottom and the left hand side. As these inks dry, they do tend to kind of blend into the cardstock, and you get a much smoother blend with the ink. So like I say, I'm not too concerned if it looks too perfect at the moment. To add even more darkness to the tag, I'm going in with the Midnight Violet colour from the Shades of Purple collection. I decided to go in with a purple rather than the darkest colour in the Bubblegum Dreams collection, because that one is a little bit more on the red side, and I wanted it to look a little bit more like it was like a really dark magenta. And this purple colour mixes really nicely with these pinks, and I just absolutely love the shade that it creates. I can now pop my tag inside of the Garden Whispers 3D embossing folder. I tend to place it towards the top of that embossing folder so that I can see exactly where that pattern is going to end up. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I can close that embossing folder. I'm then going to run it through my die cutting machine. I'm using the Platinum 6 die cutting machine today. I have got the base plate followed by the shim. I've then got my embossing folder with my tag inside, and then I've got the adapter plate D on top. And I find that this sandwich works really nicely for these embossing folders. So I'm just running that through the die cutting machine. And then I can take the tag out of the folder and it just looks so pretty. I absolutely love this image here. I did get a little bit of cracking in some areas of the cardstock. Most of the time when I add ink blending onto the cardstock before I do embossing, it doesn't tend to crack the cardstock because you've got that kind of added moisture from the inks. But it did just do it in a couple of areas here. So I went in with the lightest shade of ink just to cover up that white cardstock. And now I'm going back in with that midnight violet shade and just really darkening up those outside edges here on the bottom and the left hand side of the tag. I'm creating a tag today, but this would work really nicely on a card as well. For the faux velvet look, I'm bringing in the Cloud White pigment ink and I'm going to add it to the raised areas of the embossing folder. I do this quite a lot and I really love the technique, but usually when I do this, I tend to sort of blend the ink onto the cardstock, if that makes sense, like I would do if I was doing ink blending, just to kind of give a really kind of blended look, I suppose, but you can see the white pigment ink on top really nicely. But for today, I wanted to go in with kind of like a dabbing motion and using that sponge to my advantage and kind of getting the texture of the sponge. And I think it looks a little bit like velvet or suede. I think it does look really lovely and soft. So I'm going in lots of layers here. I'm not adding too much ink onto the sponge to start with because I found that it works better going in layers rather than kind of just going full force and adding as much of that white pigment ink as possible. The pigment ink is going to show up more on the darker areas rather than the lighter areas, but I do still want to cover some of those lighter areas with this ink as well. So I'm pretty much done with my first layer of ink here. I can then bring in that ink pad, smush a little bit more onto my mat here, pick that up, and then I'm going in here and you can see how much that really does make a difference. I'm still going fairly light-handed. I'm not kind of pressing down that applicator tool very hard, but if you're not getting the coverage you want to, you can definitely press down a little bit more. But again, just going in some layers here so I can add as much of this ink as I want to. It's very difficult to try and take it away rather than add more in. If I get any around the outside edges, I do just tend to remove that with my finger and it comes off quite nicely. The second part of this technique is that you want to mist it with something. So you can do this with water, but I'm doing it with iridescent shimmer ink spray. And you can see that as I sprayed that on, the white really popped away from the inks underneath and you just get the most soft, beautiful, velvety kind of, it's not texture technically, but it kind of looks a little bit like texture. Because I'm using the white pigment ink here, I do want to heat set it with my heat tool. So I'm just heat setting that and then I'm going to set that aside to dry. And I did get some really lovely droplets of that iridescent spray on there as well. And I think that that was a little bit of a bonus. I'm now going to work on my sentiment. So I'm taking the thank you sentiment from the Garden Whispers stamp set and I'm going to stamp that down onto some Crafty Necessities jet black cardstock. So I've just placed that in the stamp wheel. I can bring in the top flip plate of that stamp wheel to pick up the sentiment. I can then prep my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool and I do like to remove the excess powder with a brush. I can then ink up my stamp using embossing ink. This is a clear sticky ink so that when I add the embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. So I can just press that stamp down onto the cardstock. And then I can remove the cardstock and add some embossing powder on top. So I'm using a pure white crisp embossing powder today. I do like to apply it a few times, tap off the excess so that I get a really nice coverage. And then I'm going to heat set that with my heat tool. And I do like to heat set from the front and the back. It does help to prevent warping of the cardstock, but it also helps to prevent overheating of that embossing powder. When you overheat embossing powder, it tends to go a little bit grainy and it doesn't really look that nice. So trying to remove that heat tool as quickly as possible once that powder has melted. And if there are any areas that I missed with the embossing powder, I'm going in with a white gel pen just to fill in those areas. I have then cut another tag from Classic Crest 110 Solar White cardstock. I'm adding some glue tape onto the back of that. And then I can adhere that onto the back of my embossed tag. So I'm just trying to line those up as best as possible. You do have some wiggle room with that glue tape, which is really nice. Once I think that they are lined up, I'm just going to bring in a bit of scrap paper just to press that down. And I'm just using the scrap paper just so that I don't get my fingerprints into that ink. And then a couple of areas you could see that white cardstock from the side. So I'm just going in with my scissors there just to cut them down a little bit, just so it looks a little bit neater. I can then take some black twine, tie that through the top of the tag, secure that in place at the front, and then I can tie that in a bow. And I'm just going to fiddle with that bow for what seems like about 5 minutes. Once I'm happy, I can then cut those tails down with some scissors. I have then cut my sentiment out using the coordinating die, and now I'm going to add some instant dimension foam tape onto the back, and I'm using the new size of instant dimension foam tape. This is 1/4 of an inch in width, and it's the same height as the other one, but it's a little bit narrower, so it's really great for sentiments. This sentiment is really quite small, so I am still having to cut some of those pieces down, but it is a little bit easier with this size foam tape than the original size, which is really helpful. I can then remove the backings off of that foam tape with some tweezers. And then I can place that down onto the tag. And I'm just going to place it down really lightly to start with. And then I do tend to kind of bring my head in like right over the tag. Obviously I cut that out of the video, but once I was happy with the placement, just adjusted it slightly, and then I can press that down. And that is the tag finished for today. I did think about adding some embellishments on top, but because that shimmer is just, there's tons of it, it's absolutely beautiful, I didn't really feel that I needed to add any more embellishments on top.
If you have a big die cutting machine and a betterpress system, add beautiful texture to your projects by Erica. Erica shares a clever tip for using press plates to add beautiful tactile texture. The method is simple, quick and beginner friendly. Just press once and get this instant dimension, making your thank you cards feel elevated with minimal effort.
Today we are going to go texture crazy. Yes, we are. So we are going to use the Essential Textures Delightfully Dotty press plate. Now with this, you can obviously use it with a betterpress system, or you can hot foil it with like a glimmer hot foil system, but we're going to do none of that today. No, we are going to use it actually as like a embossing folder. So this gorgeous texture is going to look fabulous on white cardstock. So I have a bit of a problem with white cardstock. I just like, not a problem with white cardstock itself, but white space on a card. I am just not good at it. So to counteract that, I am quite actively adding texture to my white space on my cardstock. on my cards, because it makes it feel less naked. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. So we're going to use like a silicone mat and then also like an adapter plate. This is called an embossing plate. Now, if you have a newer system with the Platinum 6, you might have to use the gray platform D or plate D, something like that, adapter plate D. But however you do it, make sure you check the instruction booklet on for your die cutting machine on how to actually create an embossing sandwich. Now, look at that texture. Isn't that so cool? So you get different looks, you know, both one on the front and one on the back. So you decide which one you like the best. Now, I did make 2. And these we're going to use both of them, but not like on top of each other or make 2 different cards. We are going to take one. And then the second one, we are going to chop it in half very creatively at a bit of an angle. Yes, we're not going to do a straight across like box rectangular bits here. No. We're going to slide your cardstock into your trimmer, and then we're going to go at a bit of an angle so that we get a nice like modern cut. I don't know what is more modern to, or to me anyway, to go at an angular, but I just think it's just nice. So this is going to be essentially our card base. And then on the back of the little piece there, we're going to add a little bit of instant dimension foam tape because layers are life. And we are going to create a box where we are going to pop some flowers into. So we're going to put those aside for now, and we're going to grab the Craft the Flower Gladiolus set. Now this is a beautiful, beautiful set, and it actually has on the back of it, it has like cardstock suggestions, or it tells you which ones they have used for the front. So we are going to grab Frosty Pink, Pink Diamond, also Puffy Heart. I love this pink, it's such a good pink. We are going to grab a Rubelite, as well as Berrylicious. Now, I did have to make a couple of substitutes because I don't have olive cardstock. So I'm going to actually substitute it with 2 different ones. So we're going to add Forest Glade and Grass Field because, you know, it's nice to have 2 different shades of green. Now, there is also 1 more or 2 more cardstock here. So the Misty Moor, I don't have that. So we're going to substitute in the Citronella. And then I don't have a Dromeda cardstock either. But, and it's a really dark purpley color, but I had this little scrap of blue cardstock, so I thought, you know what, we're gonna use that. And it's literally just for like the little stamens in the middle of the flower. So I thought, hey, I had this little piece, let's make use of it. See, saving all those little scraps will come in handy one day. Now I did skip all of the die cutting because I did end up having to do quite a lot of like creative cutting of my cardstock to make sure that I got all of the pieces in the right color. Now, that was the tricky part. Now, the simple part is putting these together because of the clever keyhole system. All you have to do is line up your puzzle, set aside the pieces with the same symbol on them, and then a lot of the times they will actually even have numbers on them. So there's no like guessing in this. This is the simplest card making or like crafting that you can do. It is foolproof. It really is. So this is all in real time as well, by the way. So there's no fast forward just yet. We will go a little bit faster in some bits later on. But for now, this is all real time. Now this piece did confuse me a little bit. I'm like, oh, I don't know where this one went, and it's very possible that it might have come from another flower. So I ended up having to grab the back of this and my old lady eyes and try to figure out where it was coming from. But don't worry, I did figure it out in the end. So but on 2 of these flowers as well, there are extra pieces because they both have 2 different options on how you can layer the flowers up. So there is 3 flowers, but you could essentially end up with 5. So they would all look slightly different. So 2 of them would obviously look somewhat similar, but have just sort of like a final detail that is slightly different. So 5 for 3, 5 for 1? Nope. I don't know what I'm trying to say now. But anyway, we are going to skip ahead a little bit and we're going to get gluing. Yes. Now, I'm not going to bore you by sitting here and making you watch all of the gluing, but just to kind of show you how easy it is. All you need is a liquid glue and a little bit of patience. And if you have old lady eyes like me, a pair of readers or something that will make you be able to see up close will be very helpful. Just saying, take it from me. Don't suffer. Let me suffer for you. Anyway, right. So while I'm jibber jabbering on and just gluing away like a little maniac here, what I wanted to say as well about the greenery. So like in nature, normally you will find, you know, shades of colors. It's very, very rare that you'll find something that is just pure one color, like the same color everywhere. And I like having a couple of different shades, especially for greenery, to kind of just make everything kind of seem a little bit more natural. But now we have gotten to the stage where everything is glued together and we are actually going to start putting our card together. So on the back of this cut off piece, we are going to add a little bit of instant dimension foam tape. Now don't cover the whole thing because we need the top bit to be open so that we can like pop our flowers and our greenery into it. Now if for whatever reason you forget and you add too much foam tape on there, don't worry about it. You can just trim off your pieces as you're putting them onto your card. But I mean, I am a big proponent for let's puzzle and see what we like. And if you don't have press and seal, this stuff is genius, by the way. You'll probably find it in like the household, like kitchen aisle in the grocery stores. This stuff is brilliant. But if you don't have press and seal, what you can do is you puzzle and then you take a picture on your phone and then you puzzle again, try a different layout, take another picture, or do this as many times as you want. And then you compare the pictures and see which one you like the best, or if you like different elements from different designs. And then you put your card together like that. I have a number of people that tell me that they just have this kind of, the puzzling part takes them the longest because they overthink everything. And what is really important to remember is that this is creativity. This is like, there's no right or wrong really. So whether you create something that you absolutely love or whether you create something that you're thinking, I could have done better, you learn something from each one. So sometimes it's actually the failures or the things that go wrong that teach us more than the things, you know, when things go right. So don't beat yourself up about if you have kind of those tendency of doing that, because it's all part of the process and eventually you will get past that, I think. But if not, there's always videos to watch and like inspiration to be had. So don't beat yourself up about it. Enjoy this wonderful hobby that we have and just let your creativity have some fun. Now, this is the best part about press and seal, is the peel and reveal. So you did notice maybe that one of the flowers kind of popped up, but because it's stuck to the press and seal, all I had to do was add a little bit more glue and then we're there. It's not going anywhere. Now, I did have another idea. So I thought it would be a shame to let this piece go to waste. So this didn't work out super great, not as I planned. However, it wasn't a mistake. I learned something from it. So I thought, let's try cutting this thank you from the Timeless Sentiment die set out of that textured little spare piece. Because I thought it would be nice, right? It would be really nice. Now, what I kind of forgot or didn't take into account is the fact that, you know, when you run something through your die cutting machine, it doesn't just cut it out, it also flattens it pretty heavily. So I went from a really nice textured piece to a somewhat flattish piece. Like, you know, it's not flat like if it didn't have any texture on it whatsoever, but we are going to make it work. Yes, so this is just another layer of texture. So we're also going to grab some of the gorgeous glitter cardstock in citrine. And I thought it would look really nice with that thank you layered up behind the white as like a glittery gold shadow. Now, full disclosure, I did also cut out a piece using the shadow piece, and I tried that as well, but I feel like it just was a little bit too big. It took up like a little bit too much. So this is the sentiment that we're actually gonna end up using. So the gold is just kind of peeking out from behind the thank you, like the white thank you there, but it's enough to kind of just give it a little bit of interest and detail. Now, this is nice, right? You know, we could have stopped there. But are we? No, we're not. No, we're not. So we're going to add some gem sparkles and we're going to bring it to Bling Town. Now, I thought maybe the Nebula gem sparkle mix could be fun because there's a little bit of green, there's a touch of blue because of the little stamen bits, and also a lot of different shades of pink. And then I thought, I do also really like the look of the mother of pearls. So I took them both out of the packet and I kind of placed them on top the card with, obviously they're on the acetate sheet, so you can kind of see like through that, is this going to work, is it not going to work? And I gotta say, I kind of surprisingly, considering like how much I'm like adverse to like white space, instantly, like as soon as I put that sheet of mother of pearl gem sparkles on top, I was like, yeah, this is the winner, this is the one, we're gonna go for it. And I really went for it. I mean, I really went for it. But because they are that sort of white iridescent, they just kind of blend into the card. And I absolutely love how this turned out. This card is actually based on this one on the right. So I made that one first with the Craft of Flower Larkspur. So the pink one is the Craft of Flower Gladiolus. And beautiful set, love it. And this is the Larkspur set. So this was the original card. And I did really like how that turned out, but as you can see, it's quite sort of like toned down compared to this one with the gladiolus and the sparkles.
Sophisticated Wood Texture by Jaycee. In this video, Jaycee uses the betterpress system to emboss a striking wood grain texture into a black cardstock base. By pressing the plate into the heavyweight cardstock, Jaycee achieves beautiful, rich depth. A simple white thank you sentiment adds elegant contrast and makes the design both eye-catching and incredibly simple. Perfect for beginners wanting a sophisticated handmade look.
Coming up with cards with more muted or black and whites palettes is an easy task, but it's just not as fun to make a card with not a lot of color. However, I understand that sometimes you need these kinds of cards for certain folks in your life, and here's some tips to create some fun card creations with a modern touch. This time I'm starting with the background to this card. In my betterpress system, I'm using a panel of black cardstock as my background. And the betterpress plate I'm using is the Essential Textures wood press plate. Easily one of my new favorites. So on the previous card, we debossed the texture onto cotton cardstock. This time we can use the betterpress plate as a stamp and create an embossed texture. I'm using a watermark ink or embossing inks to completely cover the betterpress plate. I think this technique is great for textures that don't have to be exact, like the previous rustic burlap. You can even use this technique on the next betterpress plate too. So once I've pressed the embossing ink onto this black cardstock panel, I'll use a clear embossing powder to heat emboss. Be sure to remove the panel from your platen before you heat emboss. And just like that, we have created an embossed texture as opposed to a debossed texture on the card front. I love the look of this. It reminds me of matte black fixtures in bathrooms for that modern and luxurious feeling. To carry on this theme, I'm using a foiled sentiment from Encouraging Sentiments hot foil plate set and die set. I used another panel of black cardstock to make this sentiment. I also feel like this card needed just one more element to complete, so I used Itty Bitty Branches die set to cut a few of the leaf images from vellum. I arranged these images around the sentiment. Then I embellished and finished this card with some enamel dots. I love the mixture of textures of this card. I think this card is suited for anyone for a fairly quick and sophisticated thank you card, using betterpress plates as background stamps.
Adding drama and textures to cards by Erica. In this tutorial, Erica uses the Ink Poppy's press and foil plate to create a beautifully detailed floral panel with letterpress style texture, then enhances it using watercolour wash to softly fill in the poppies. The result is an elegant, handcrafted thank you card that looks so sophisticated, yet is so simple enough for beginners.
We're gonna have a real good look at the Inked Poppies press plate. We're gonna use some betterpress paper and ink. And we're also gonna get our betterpress platform out, of course, because we need that. And I will be using my little saver because I'm one of those weirdos who do not like that my platform gets stained. So I created this little acetate film protector thing that I use while I'm inking up my plate so that the platform itself stays clean. That makes sense, right? Is it just me? I mean, it might just be me, but I think it's kind of genius. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. Now, the reason I am using the betterpress ink instead of Altenew ink is because I actually wanted to try something. So you might notice that I'm dabbing as well as rubbing the ink onto the panel, because I do find that it's just kind of, it just takes a long time. Okay, it takes a long time to get the betterpress plates or any like letterpress plates really, really good inked up. It cannot be just me. I don't think it's just me, unless I'm doing something really, really wrong. So I thought, you know what? I don't kind of mind if I ruin this ink pad, because it was the one that came like free with the platform. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a go. I didn't want to ruin my Altenew ink pad, so I thought, you know what? This little one, it's gonna be our sacrificial lamb today. So I rubbed the ink all over our beautiful inked poppies press plate, and then we're going to use some watercolor paper here. This is the betterpress paper, and we're going to secure it with a little bit of post-it tape to our little saver thing here, and then we're going to run the whole shebang through the die cutting machine. You might have noticed that all of this has been done in real time, so it literally is just a couple of minutes to get a panel done, you know, minus my jibber jabbering there in the beginning. So we're just going to run this through nice and steady, no need to rush, just go slow and steady, and then we're going to open this up and reveal our beautiful panel. I am actually going to be using some Corinne markers to color this today, because I don't have any of the dual tip markers from Altenew. However, I will definitely be adding those to my stash when I am in the US later this month. Yes, at the time of this video going live, I am in the US! Yay! So I will probably have already been shopping lots. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to clear off our desk a little bit, and then we're going to zoom in a little bit, because we are going to do quite an in-depth coloring tutorial, I guess you could say. So the way I use watercolor markers is when I want a nice coloring. Okay, that kind of came out a little bit wrong. So when I want to build up texture and, like, you know, details and all of this, what I tend to do is I use one of these watercolor brushes, and then I take a little bit of ink from the tip of the marker, and then I build up. We're gonna build. So we're gonna put some color down. So this is very, very light green, and we are going to put a little bit down all over these leaves. This is going to be quite a light color wash, and if there are some white spaces on your leaves as well, I wouldn't worry about it, because it would just help you create those highlights on your leaves, because you don't want it to be super flat, like all one color. You know, we're not going to color like when we were 4. We are going to try to elevate our coloring and take it to the next step. So a soft start or base, and then you will go in with other colors, or you wait until this is completely dry and then you go in with the same color, because you don't actually need a huge bunch of watercolor markers or watercolors even. You can actually build up your colors with most colors or watercolor products. You can do this. So there's no need to buy like 100 marker set or something like that. You don't have to do that. Save your pennies. and then just work on your technique rather than spending lots of money on the supplies. So with the dual tip markers, for instance, that Altenew has available in the shop, there's a lot of, so there's 4 different sets, and a lot of them, except for one, has got pretty much like a rainbow of color, whether it's like really bright or a little bit more pastel. So you get a lot of colors and combinations that you can create yourself in the pack. So I like that a lot. Now here, I have actually moved on to another color. So this is, I have 3 different color greens, which is a little bit excessive, but I do have the whole set of Corinne markers. So I'm just gonna go with it. Okay. And then we are going to kind of keep building up the colors here, and like our texture and the depth and the details and stuff. Now, I cannot overstate how important it is to just let everything dry in between. So when you have an image like this with a lot of different leaves, try to keep a track of where you started and kind of like do either counterclockwise or clockwise, so that you keep track of where you started, and then give every little bit of time to dry in between. It will just give you so much better results, I promise. So we're gonna, obviously, I did forget the stem. A bit of a boo-boo there. But I'm gonna go in with my final green here, and we're gonna go quite heavy. And we're gonna go with lots and lots of ink on our watercolor brush. Now, if you want really like full-on details, which I will be doing, unfortunately that little part didn't film, of course. Once all of this is dry and I've done several layers, I am actually going to go in with marker directly to paper to really create that kind of like the deep dark contrast, to kind of create the shadows and the lights and all of that. So I will show you the card up close when it's finished. It's really sad that bit didn't film, but you know, sometimes I'm telling you, technology is it's out to get me. So yeah, but we're gonna move on to our pink here, and you can see it's quite a light sort of brush of pink, and we are not gonna go all over every single little bit of the petal. We are gonna leave some white spaces here so that we can work with those like highlights and then create the contrast with our darker colors later on. But yeah, it's just coloring with one of these refillable water paintbrushes has been a revelation, because it just gives you so much more, like I feel like it gives you a lot of control, and it also gives you a lot of options, because you can dilute your color, and then when you're wanting to build up, you just squeeze out the excess water in the bristles, and you just go in with lots and lots and lots of ink, and yes, tip top tool, that for sure. Now, I'm fully aware that we have been here a long time, and we are still coloring away, and there's still more to go, so I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Now, if you want to see more of this type of coloring with the press plates and things, I would love to hear that, so please do drop me a comment down below. And if there is interest in like the real-time coloring as well, I will definitely make a note of that, and tips and tricks and things like that, because I really do enjoy watercolor brushes. I just find them so versatile, and they're so easy to travel with, which is very good for me because I live in Spain. So when my father lives in Sweden, my mother lives in Finland, my sister lives in England, and a lot of my friends live in the US, so there is a lot of traveling. I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of traveling. So having something that is easy to travel with and fun to use is super handy. Cannot overstate that, because if I don't get to create on a regular basis, I do tend to go a little bit like bonkers. It's one of those little, I want to say it's a quirk, but you know how like some people get hangry, which admittedly I do as well, but it's almost like I get like craftily, like yeah, it's a weird thing. But anyway, okay, now you can kind of see here how we're starting to build up some like contrast and some dimension here, and it's really just from adding color and kind of thinking about where it's going. I mean, on the actual press plate as well, you have those kind of like dark shadows, so you already have a very good idea of like where some of these like contrast bits are going to go. Now, if you want to just kind of go color willy-nilly and just have a happy old time. I highly encourage that because crafting and card making should be about creating joy and then having fun. Definitely. Definitely. I think it's got to be the biggest thing in card making for sure, because yeah, like I said, if I don't get to create all the time, it feels like I don't have an outlet for all of this crazy energy. So doing something like this definitely helps. Now, we are almost finished with the coloring bit here, so just hang in a little bit longer. We're nearly there, because I did forget a couple of little bits here. I didn't remember, or I didn't see. I don't know whether I got a little bit blinded because those flowers are so pretty, and I just wanted to kind of like get to the flowers, and I forgot that, or didn't notice that there were some leaves and stems that I hadn't colored. But anyway, I'm trying to rectify that now. And we are going to just fill in the middle of the flowers here. I have gone for kind of a silvery grey to kind of match what a poppy would look like in real life, even though there are pink poppies, but I've never seen pink poppies this color. I actually have soft pink poppies, almost like lavenderish ones in my garden. But I've never seen poppies this color, but that is not going to stop us from having a good old time when it comes to coloring, because that is the fun thing. It doesn't have to be realistic. You can just use colors that give you joy. I think that's pretty important. It's not about perfect. It's about having fun and something creating joy for you, because then it will also be a joy to give away, right? Now, so I stopped to let this dry a little bit, and then I was going to come back and, film a little bit more, but no. That didn't film at all. So, I have added more color here, and I've also added a sentiment. I have no idea where that footage went to. It's technology. You and I are going to have words one day. But for now, I am going to carry on and try to keep calm, because it's bling bling time. Oh yes, we are going to use some gem sparkles from the Onyx palette. Okay, so they're all black, obviously, onyx. There's 3 different sizes, and we are going to add a lot of them. Yes, we are. We're really going to add a lot of them, because we are going to make this card pop. This is going to be delicious for the recipient to like just run his or her fingers over these gemstones, feel that texture from the letterpress of the inked poppies, and yeah. We're gonna add a lot. Now, I will say again that not everyone likes the same amount of bling as I do, and that is fine. That is completely fine. Now, if you do feel like you need a little bit of a push when it comes to the bling, I am here for you. I am here for you. We are gonna make this happen. We're gonna take you to Bling Town, and you're gonna love it. So this is our card almost finished. Now, I did add a slightly longer banner than the card width itself. So I'm just checking with my scissors to make sure that there aren't any like serrated edges, because I don't like that when you cut something off and you get those like little tooth marks. No, I don't like that. So I just wanted to make sure that it was going to cut straight. And then this is going to go onto our card base, and our card is done. What do you think? Adding some like dramatic texture with watercoloring. Easy peasy, right? The bling is just the icing on the cake.
We hope you're inspired to create your own beautiful thank you cards. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss any card making ideas from All To New. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us which thank you card idea was your favourite, or share your own go-to design. Happy crafting! Loved watching this video. There is more where that came from here on the All To New official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon, and happy crafting!